the uncertainty principle of everything. So Heisenberg has an uncertainty principle that he established within the realm of physics, which means that at the extreme level in the quantum realm, you can't measure certain properties to the precise number both at the same time. So the example that's always used is the canonical example is momentum and position. If you want to know precisely what the momentum of a particle is, you don't know what the position is. One corollary of that is quantum fluctuations, which we believe are the main driving forces of the evolution of the universe. So I want to use this concept and borrow it and apply it to the rest of the world. There's an uncertainty principle, for example, in economics between fairness, prosperity, liberty, for example. So there are certain properties of society that don't commute. That means you can't have a very precise measure of fairness and at the same time have a precise measure of liberty and prosperity. Those things don't commute. And I think one of the big takeaways from this thought is that we need to design systems that are much, much more agile and allow for imprecision of these elements. So let's say at a company level, we have the same problem. We want growth, we want liberty and freedom to express themselves, but we also want, we need to have a restriction of liberty. In other words, we have to have, let's say, CEOs and things like that to run the company. So there's again, if we go to the extreme, we can't have a company where everything is free and people feel like liberated to do what they want, and at the same time have a CEO who's incredibly authoritarian. These things that you can't have. If you have one extreme, if you go to one extreme with this, then the others will not be. You won't be able to have them. So you have a company where everything is free and happy-go-lucky. You might have creativity, but you're not going to be able to generate returns. So the conclusion is that we have to deal with it the same way that the physics people have, classical physics and quantum physics, and they separate these things because in classical physics, if you will, the separation between classical physics and quantum physics is that in classical physics, we humans can measure precise stuff, and most of science is about measuring. And then in quantum physics, actually we can't measure things, or at least not in this universe. Maybe in the multiverse we can, but not in the universe. And the goal is, and this is now David Deutsch, to find better solutions to problems, right? So we know we're always imperfect because of the quantum situation that we're in, where if we go to one extreme, if we solve one problem, we create new problems. That is not something that is anecdotal. This is by definition. And I think this gives a nice backbone, a theoretic backbone for the need to be open for new solutions. And I think it gives a theoretic backbone also. It gives a theoretic backbone for Karl Popper, if you think about it. This is an Run podcast. It's September 28, 2023. This is Spring Telco. For today, the fund is up 4.5%. The market is up about 0.5%. For the year, we are up 112.5%. The market's up 12.5%. We're up by 100%. Just before I go into the discussion of the uncertainty principle for economics, I want to just discuss a little bit what's going on in the market. So the Fed is taking a stance. The Fed is threatening to raise rates. So we have a pretty stressful situation in the market because interest rates are going up, and interest rates going up is never good for the economy. We have, unfortunately, inflationary pressures at the same time. So there's a risk of stagflation here because we have oil prices going up, and we also have housing prices not coming down. So we have a situation where demand is still strong, and therefore we have the desired effect of disinflation is not happening now. This demand is strong because the government has been spending $8 trillion or whatever the trillions are, something along those lines. Maybe it was less, but we pumped a lot of money into the system, and that money is still floating around. And unfortunately, we are suffering from that. Now, as far as our portfolio is concerned, we are hawkishly managing our leverage because this is the only real control we have. We believe that our investments are sound, that they will come out stronger at the other end of this turmoil that is potentially going to happen. Because when you have inflation and high interest rates, demand has to come down. Demand has to come down. People have to stop buying things so prices can come down and we can restart the economy at a lower level. This hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened particularly in two areas. One is housing, and the other is the government itself, which is fueling. One is fueling the other. So that's the state of the economy right now. We're trying to assess the severity of it, like everybody else. I mean, the only good news, actually, the silver lining, is that everybody's talking about it. And usually, when everybody is afraid of correction and everybody's afraid of turmoil, then maybe that's already priced in the market. But unfortunately, it's never priced. So what we could have is problems in the real estate sector. That's my point. So we have problems in the real estate sector. Housing prices come down. And then we have banks getting in trouble, mortgages getting in trouble, the Fed has to intervene, interest rates come down, and then we go back to the cycle. This is kind of where we see things going. As far as the drawdown is concerned, I mean, we could have a maybe 50% drawdown that will bring us back to where we were at the beginning of the year. That would be, of course, very painful. However, we hope that Tesla's strength and Tesla's much superior market position will prevent that from happening. We already had a 20% correction from the peak, so maybe we can just live with a 20-30% more correction, so 50% from the peak. That will be preferable, but again, of course, very difficult to assess that from this point of view. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund, and you might think that I'm not really giving a lot of guidance here in how to manage a portfolio during this type of turmoil. The reason I am not able to give guidance is because there's no blueprint, there's no book how to do this other than, again, hawkishly manage your leverage, make sure you are able to sustain large downturns. And leverage is not just the money you borrow against your positions, it's also your cost structure. Always be hawkishly managing that. Always have a plan B. Always have some money on the side to be able to survive a really tough downturn. These are my only hopefully tangible recommendations here. Again, this is not investment advice by any means. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund, and that's it. Please do your own work as far as investing is concerned. To be fair, we at Orange Capital Partners are not really following suit with all the recommendations. We have all our capital invested in stocks. We do have it with different institutions, but we do have everything invested. So we are planning to sustain a downturn by being able to manage our leverage. Now let's get back to the situation with uncertainty principle. So I find this an interesting thought that you have in physics the problem of uncommutability of properties such as momentum and position, for example, which is the basic idea of quantum physics in general, is that we have at the quantum level identities that are not commuting. That means you can't precisely know a position and momentum at the same time. I want to translate this idea to society and the real world, because what happens in quantum might as well happen with the real world. And I think there is a corollary here, and that is that, let's say in economics, you can never have a precise measurement of fairness and at the same time maintain prosperity and liberty. Those are just three factors that came to my mind. You can probably expand them. And I think understanding that and taking that as a given is a good start. So we don't waste our time fighting tooth and nail for fairness and prosperity and all these things when we know that in the limit we can't have them all precisely defined. So what that means is, of course, doesn't mean we can't not have it. The same way in physics, we do have position and momentum. You can have a car that goes at 60 miles an hour, and you can measure his position. You can do that. And it might not be fully precise, but it's good enough for humans. And what humans are, basically what classical physics is whatever's measurable for humans. So we humans, we live in, I wouldn't call it classical physics, instead I would call it human physics. So physics that humans can measure is what we call classical physics. And then what we can't measure, or we can't have precise understanding of position and momentum at the same time. What's not possible, that's quantum physics. So understanding what's not possible, of course, is very useful. So that way we can also approach extra limits and understand where the limits are, what happens to absolute zero, to the energy levels of a hydrogen atom. And we know what we can see or measure in this, at least in this multiverse, and then we can measure everything else. Like that famous ad by Mastercard. Not everything is measurable, but for everything else there is physics. So you could use that as a nice tagline. So now the uncertainty principle in society, the uncertainty principle in economics just postulates that you can never precisely have a measure and an execution of fairness, prosperity, and liberty at the same time. Those things don't commute. So the corollary is, again, the Heisenberg Uncertainty Principle. But what's more important here is, once we recognize that, there's a couple of learnings that we can take from this. And I think first and foremost, I think Karl Popper's idea that we are never correct, that we are always basically tapping in the dark and finding better solutions for problems, is actually sustained with this idea. That just means that, look, because we can't, whatever we can't measure, that's subject to the uncertainty principle. That means that whatever we can measure is never going to be precise. There's never going to be a precise measure of fairness or liberty. It's never going to be precise. So we better keep looking for solutions to make better solutions. Now, what's better and worse? I think this is very important, particularly in the realm of society and social sciences. Of course, we don't want to fall into relativism. That is dictatorship, despotism. That's not a good idea. Relativism would mean that there is no such thing as the truth. There's no such thing as correct measurements of anything. So therefore, we just, we say whatever we want to say, and it's all power struggle. That's not true. That's not true at all. And that's also very consistent with Popper and Deutsch, where you say, look, there is a truth. There is a precise measurement of things. It's just we humans can't do it. We don't have the ability to do it. There might be a precise measure of fairness, liberty, and prosperity in the multiverse somewhere. Those things actually collide at the perfect angle to each other. However, we humans, at least in this multiverse, don't have the ability to measure that, but we can get better at it. We can get better at it. There is truth. There is something that can be right, and there's something that can be wrong. And that's unbelievably important. This is also, the name of this podcast is not even wrong. What does that mean? What does Wolf Capaldi mean by not even wrong? It means that, look, in order to be wrong, you have to be on the right path. And then you can be wrong. Meaning you cannot have a good measurement or a good theory of something, but you have to be at least on the right path. Relativism is not even wrong. So it's gibberish. It has no scientific backing. It has no logic backing. It has no nothing that works for us humans in order to improve our condition. And this is the North Star. How can we improve our condition? Everything we can do towards improving our condition counts, and everything else doesn't count. So the uncertainty principle, again, says that whatever is measurable is what humans can measure. So we have basically in the physics realm what we call classical physics. That's really human physics, and everything else is quantum physics. Understanding what we can't measure, what doesn't commute, understanding what forces, what properties are subject to the uncertainty principle. Understanding that's what physics is partly about. The other part of physics is, okay, measure everything else, and that's fine. And keep improving the measurements. Keep improving the measurements. That's key, because we know that we are on the right path. There is such a thing as the right position and the right momentum in the multiverse. We can't get there. That's according to Heisenberg, but we can keep improving. We can keep improving, let's say in physics, we can, lower the time scale, even faster, 10 to the minus 9, 10 to the minus 12 seconds, and so on and so forth. Lower increase the frequency, increase the energy, lower the spatial difference between two measurements, things like that. We can all do these things, right? We will never get fully there, but we can approach it. We can get better at it. The same applies to economics. Again, if I just take the three most important pillars of economics, in my opinion, that is prosperity, liberty, and fairness. You want to have those three things they don't commute. So we will never have a fully commutable, a measurable, and executable set of properties, of these three properties. It will never happen, right? We can't have that, at least not in this multiverse. But we can approach, we can get better. We can have better measurements of fairness, for example. I think John Rawls' measure of fairness, or Kant, those are attempts to measure fairness, which is if a society can do better without hurting anybody else, then they should do better, therefore they're not fair. So in those terms, fairness can be improved. Prosperity, what is prosperity? How do we measure prosperity? In the extreme, prosperity is measured by wealth, then we can have a society that increases its wealth, but we might end up with robber barons, so that's not a good thing. So we have to balance it. And then, the third pillar, which is liberty, that is society goes on without coercion. So the less coercion, so if you optimize liberty for liberty, you want to have the other two, prosperity and fairness, without coercion. So all those things are possible, and we can get better, we can improve on it, and that's what economics does, that's what other studies, social studies do. And even the hard sciences can help us understand this, like I just do here. I use a corollary from physics into economics. I think it's very powerful, actually, to have the uncertainty principle applied to economics, because, again, it puts Popper and Deutsch into the right angle. It says that, look, there is a fundamental reason why they are right. And the right is, they are right because we can't exactly measure prosperity, fairness, and liberty, but we can improve on it. There is a right set of properties that a society could have. There is a right one in the multiverse somewhere. That set is perfectly right. There's an ideal society somewhere. It is possible, but we're not there, and we're going to work towards that. And we're going to improve and get better and replace solutions with better solutions, replace policies with better policies. For example, if we have a problem with liberty and power, okay, take this podcast, again, it's about investing, right? So why am I talking about these things? Let's take a company, right? I've written about this already. I've written about the libertarian paradox. So we have a company like Tesla that, given its productivity and its application of compute to solving business problems, in our opinion, will become a market-dominant company with lots and lots of value and lots of power. So that is, of course, orthogonal to the concept of liberty. And it's orthogonal to the concept of fairness. So how do we fix that? It is not orthogonal to the concept of prosperity. So in order to fix that, one thing, and this is the mistake we often do, is we cannot have perfect measures of these things. So we have to approximate it. We have to, like in classical physics, assume that, okay, look, we can't have a perfect measure of position and momentum, but we can approximate these things, and we can build airplanes and cars and things like that based on those approximate measurements of momentum and velocity, momentum and position. The same way here, we can have a good sense for fairness. For example, fairness would be, again, a Kantian version of fairness, that as soon as we can do better without hurting anybody else, that's something we should be doing. That's, I think, a lot of research and development is in that realm. There, we can improve the human condition by finding more efficient batteries. While that probably hurts, always somebody gets hurt, so we cannot never hurt anybody, but maybe we can reduce the hurtfulness and increase the value. That's what I wrote in the essay. The world runs on compute, where I talk about libertarian paradox. I say that if we can add 10x in value relative to before the disruption, and if we leave a lot of that value on the table for society, then we will be tolerated. So maybe that is a measure of fairness. Prosperity is given by the increase of value, and then we also have the concept of liberty. Now, the concept of liberty just means that we don't want to be coerced into things. We want to be free to do things, and we have orthogonality here, because if a company like Tesla dominates the electric car market and the energy market and the energy storage market, then we have a problem, which is we might we might have lack of liberty and too much power in the hands of few people. How can we solve that? We can have a constitution for corporates. I suggested that. So there's ways to mitigate this problem. There's ways to mitigate this problem. Again, fundamentally, we just want to get better at solutions and replace existing solutions with better solutions. This is the key. I think the uncertainty principle of economics and the uncertainty principle of everything is a fundamental justification of Popperism. This would be my conclusion. So to summarize again, this is the conclusion. We have the uncertainty principle that applies in physics, with Werner Heisenberg applying it to position and momentum, for example, applies to everything else. It applies to economics, society, social sciences. And we have to take this very seriously in a sense that we can say anything which is measurable, that's classical physics, anything which is not measurable. So, for example, the exact position of, that's the definition of quantum physics. It's whatever you can, any properties that you can't measure at the same time. That's quantum, and everything else is classic, and we can approach quantum by improving our classical understanding of the world. We can never get to the quantum side, at least on this multiverse. We don't have the knowledge for that. But we can approach that by getting better solutions and better outcomes for existing